I mean, all of us are called to share the gospel, but a lot more of us are to be more engaged than we are today. I think that almost any Christian would agree that what we see around us it shouldn't be the status quo. We really should be seeing Christians engaged more, that we should be seeing conversations happening more. We should be seeing the same responses that we see Jesus receiving when he preaches the truth in love. We shouldn't be the nice ones. We shouldn't be seeking men's acceptance. We should be seeking God and God alone, and his acceptance. And that is through just a faithful obedience and being satisfied in him and not seeking the praise of man. One, I think this is really simple. You can't fear rejection. I know that sounds cliche, that sounds simple. Oh, you already know that. However, we all do. We all want the feeling of acceptance. It feels good. It feels right. We want that feeling of that gratification of being liked by our peers, especially those of higher authority than you. See, when you have a fear of rejection, what you actually have is not specifically a fear of rejection. That's not a root cause. The root cause is specifically a love for yourself, a preservation for yourself, or a lack of trust in the Lord and what he's called you to do, whether he's going to preserve you, protect you, provide for you. Really, our call is to be faithful, and the Lord has the rest. So when we say, like, we have this innate fear of rejection, we should always be looking at the root fear. Where is that rooted in? Typically, again, that is in just a inward-looking man that is looking to preserve themselves and doesn't actually trust the faithful promises of the Lord. So my encouragement there, pray, be in the Word, but more specifically, maybe even look for the promises of the Lord. Pray upon the promises of God and what he's going to do, what he already is doing, how he has saved you, what he's done in the past. Look at the cross and let that motivate you. Let that stir you. Dwell on the gospel. Dwell on the justice of God. You know, hell is a very sobering thing to dwell upon. Dwell on it. Dwell on the day of your death. Dwell on the judgment day to come. When he makes all things right, we should be very sober when approaching that topic. Let that drive you and seek promises. And maybe I'll make another video on the promises of God and how it can drive us to love the lost more. But that's my first tip. Very simple, is just to be honest. Oftentimes we're not honest as we go about our daily life, and that's because of our culture. There's an air of niceness, of, a comfortability with just business professionalism. And there's a time and a place. Don't get me wrong. We shouldn't be screaming the gospel from the table in our local cafe just because, hey, maybe no one's heard the gospel here. Let's just give it a go and see what happens. No, there is wisdom. Like, the Bible does talk a lot about wisdom. I think there is a call for wisdom in this conversation. But in terms of just every day, by God's providence, where you are in your daily in and out goings and to and from, are you honest in your conversations? And what I mean by that is when people ask you about your weekend, and let's say you're an honest church-going guy and you really enjoy the things of the Lord, you study theology, you pray with your family, you lead them in family worship, you sing songs, you do the things, you volunteer at church, you even go above and beyond, and maybe you go to church twice or 3 times a week, who knows? Or you attend an extra Bible study. I mean, that's basically, in our culture, you're a super Christian. Let's say you're there. When you are in your life outside of those things, oftentimes conversations come up about what do you do? What do you enjoy? How was your weekend? Very typical questions, but honestly, it gets a little silly, but we avoid the most important parts of our life for the sake of no confrontation. We avoid the Bible study that we attend. We avoid the sermon that you just said, wow, that was so good. That changed my life. We avoid the prayer night that we're so excited to gather with other saints and appeal to the Lord and enter into his throne room and Pray for the salvation of others. Meanwhile, there's a person right in front of you that maybe doesn't know the Lord. And if you were just honest and told them what you actually were excited about, what you love doing, where the Lord has you, and be honest about who God is, I can't tell you how often those conversations turn into transformative conversations that actually bleed elsewhere. For example, I just spoke with a family member of mine, and I just mentioned a Bible study, and it just launched into question after question after question. And little did I know, she didn't have very little understanding of the Bible, and it turned into an invitation here, an exhortation from the Word, maybe even a rebuke from the Word. And my goodness, that just does all the work for you. And that's just simple, faithful Christian living. But if we would just be honest with our words, if we would be so bold to say, the Lord is the God of the heavens and the earth, and He rules and reigns today. I am a son and daughter of Him, and I'm bought in blood, I'm purchased by Him. I am His servant forevermore. And that actually extended to the public space. That's my next tip. I hope that helps. On to the next one. Lastly, I can't stress this enough, and I think it really can't be stressed enough, is just specifically praying. When you pray, you have a spiritual look upon everything. The veil between the spiritual and the normal, the divide between flesh and spirit does begin to collapse. And the Bible really doesn't see those as two distinctives. We are one whole. We are spirit and flesh. We are embodied souls, and our bodies, there's not that distinction. That's very Gnostic. We don't have that division of spiritual and secular very much in the scriptures at all. That's more Gnostic than anything in the world, is that division right there. When you pray, and I again sounds cliche, but this is legitimate. When you pray, the opportunities just start popping up. Everything changes. The Lord's providence in how He has arranged your life and who you interact with, people start coming out to speak with you, and the opportunities show up. I can't tell you how many times I've went onto the street with no idea what's going to happen. So I just plead with the Lord, God, I just want to be faithful. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to hand out a tract. It's cheesy. Maybe it's like one of those $1 trillion tracts from Living Waters. And I'm kind of embarrassed to hand that thing out sometimes because it's just like, oh, it's goofy. Like, who's going to read that? And then I hand one out. I'm in a 2-hour conversation with this secular New Ageist, atheist, maybe Buddhist, dabbled in the occult person. And by the end of it, they're like, I will seriously consider the gospel. I can't tell you how many times that has happened, more times than is on this channel, because I don't record all my conversations. And it just is mind-boggling when you start praying and you just walk out in faithful obedience, how the Lord blesses. That is so simple, and yet I bet you a lot of you don't pray very often. I know that because I've lived in America. I've lived in 2 different states now for a chunk of time, met tons of believers from different variety of churches, different denominations, different backgrounds. And prayer is underemphasized. And I'm not talking about this manifesting prayer or self-centered prayer. I'm talking about a prayer, a deep desire and love for God first, for His glory first, and then just a deep longing to obey and ask for His help. And you would just be amazed to see what the Lord does with that prayer. When you pray according to His will, His promises come alive. I've already mentioned this before. This is why I'm making the point again. I just want to really hone in on prayer. The Bible, all the prophets, Daniel, praying even in defiance of their government. Prayer does change things. And the Lord's providence and His plan and His sovereignty, it changes things. So we trust it as a means of His grace to actually move things that we could never imagine to be moved. And that's when things begin to change forever. That's when, again, not just sharing your faith, the vibrancy and assurance that the Lord is with you, he's walking with you. Miracles actually start happening. I remember one time when I was standing outside of a Planned Parenthood, pouring down rain, sliding around, like just torrential downpour. And it was the first confirmed save we had outside of the Planned Parenthood in Bend, Oregon. And it was all due to prayer. I don't arrange these setups. I don't arrange the times. I don't arrange the moment when I meet these people on the street. I don't know how often you have free time, 2 hours to talk to a stranger, but that has happened so many times when I'm on the street discussing the things of God and holiness and the gospel and his blood and how it reconciles us to the Father. I'm having multi-hour conversations with folks. And I'm like, what are you, I don't even know what you were doing prior to this conversation. Who has this much time to talk about these things? The Lord arranges the time. And that's all through prayer. That is my last point, my last tip, my last trick. I don't know why I call it tricks. It's not really a trick. It's just the faithful living in the scriptures. I'm going to be continuing this series. I'm also going to be continuing to hit the streets, hopefully here soon, handing out tracts, having conversations. And then I'm also here to answer your questions. If you have questions about how I got started doing this or why, that's probably the most often, the most question I get most often is why I got started even handing out tracts, why I think that's a good expression of evangelistic obedience. If you have any questions or even apologetic questions, how do you respond to this person? Or I just had a conversation with my mother-in-law and it went this way. What would you say? Feel free to drop it. I'm going to read it. There's not many of us watching right now. So yeah, I'll be sure to read all the comments, and I'll be uploading a video of this show probably 2 days a week. And then you can expect other shows to pop up soon. All right. Thank you so much, and God bless.